I'd like to call the November 8th, 2012 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council to order. Ms. Scott, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Knutson. Here. Mr. Pons.
Here.
Mayor Holman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Friley.
Here.
Mr. Foster.
Here.
Our first order of business today is council minutes for the meetings of October 8th and October 11th, 2012. Are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the council meeting minutes of October 8 and October 11, 2012.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Friley.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Next order of business is matters of special privilege. I believe we have none today. Is that correct? And that brings us to our next agenda item, which is a public hearing. This is a public hearing for PCR 12-019, request of Spring Arbor of Williamsburg for a special use permit for an addition at 935 Capitol Landing Road. Carolyn?
Sure. Mayor Holman and members of council, as you just stated, Spring Arbor of Williamsburg is requesting a special use permit to construct an addition on the right rear of the building, the area in red here, to accommodate up to 28 special care residents with dementia and Alzheimer's. The applicant does not propose to increase the 92 beds previously approved by council, but proposes to alternate on an as-needed basis the number of special care beds with the assisted living beds. The comprehensive plan designates this area as office land use, and it is located in the LB4 Limited Business Corridor District. The building addition will have the same design and materials as the existing building, and the Architecture Review Board approved the building design in October. The original special use permit granted in 2004 was for an 80-bed facility, and City Council approved an increase in 2005 to 92 beds. Adequate parking is provided on site, and the proposal will not increase the total number of beds. Therefore, the intensity will not increase. Therefore, staff recommended that Planning Commission recommend to City Council that the special use permit for the addition be approved. Planning Commission held a public hearing in October. No one spoke, and Planning Commission recommends to City Council that the special use permit for the addition be approved as proposed. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Bo Cook, the applicant, is also here if you have any questions of him.
Right. Thank you, Carolyn. Are there any questions before we open the public hearing?
I have one, and it may be two. Ms. Murphy, can you help me? How many beds are actually or currently in use in the facility?
Mr. Cook might need, they have approval for 92 beds currently, and what they do with the addition is they still will remain with just 92 beds, but I don't know how many he currently has is occupied. Mr. Cook might be able to answer.
And let me go ahead and ask the follow-up to that question, and maybe you can help with that too. Once the addition is put in place and 92 beds is still the limit, is there some inspection procedure or some regulation that checks to make sure that the 92 beds are not exceeded? Is that
Well, I think the room layout, and you can probably see it, the room layouts we have will still only have 92 beds, so I think that sort of regulates it unless you have another addition put on, or some room is, say a meeting room or something is converted to a bed, and I would think you need to have a permit to do that. So I think it's sort of self-enforcing, but currently we don't have any inspection that we go in and count beds in the current facility.
Okay, because it's in here, or I thought you had mentioned that there might be some occasional shift of use. Would that just be shift of use of the addition?
Right.
Not shifting of occupancy from one area to another?
Like, say, for these three rooms could be one or the other, or all these rooms could be one or the other. It depends on the type of patients they have at the time as to what beds get used for the Alzheimer's and dementia and what beds are used for assisted living.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question. Carolyn, if they wanted to increase the number of beds, can we do that, or do they have to go to the state for approval?
Well, to increase the number of beds, would need to come back first to increase the special use permit number from 92.
Right.
And I don't know what the state requirements are as far as increasing, but you might know that. Probably is. You have to go to the state. It's based on zoning, is it?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I open the public hearing? Thank you, Carol. And with that, I'll open the public hearing, and if anyone wishes to speak to this, please come forward, state your name and address, and I think you might be able to answer some of the questions. Thank you.
My name's Bo Cook, and I work for H.H. Hunt Corporation, who is the owner of Spring Arbor of Williamsburg. To address your question on the occupancy within the building, it varies depending on the time, but on average, we run in the mid to the upper 80s consistently, and that can vary. What we did when we first came here and asked for the rezoning, we asked for, I believe it was 80 beds. What we quickly found out is that we had a lot of married couples that actually occupied the building. So that kind of, and I guess it's 80 rooms, is that right? 80 beds. So what we found out is that we actually were occupying rooms with double occupants, whether it's a married couple or it could be a related individuals, or it could be just non-related. But we had the need to increase that because of the double occupancy. So that's when we asked for the 92s. We've never hit 92, but what that did for us, it gave us the flexibility to work between 80 and 92 to make sure that the building was occupied and that we were offering the services to the residents that needed that. With this new special use request, what we found over the last many years is that we're having more and more people with dementia and early Alzheimer's, and what we're trying to do, and we actually have people that live with us now that actually could benefit from a more secure environment. So what we're doing is we're actually taking that wing and converting part of it to some common area space that would be dedicated to that specific wing. And the addition is actually, we're adding some more rooms to replace what we're using as common area. What Carolyn had mentioned is that it would be a maximum of 28. We probably won't hit that as a maximum in that particular wing. What we anticipate will probably operate at between 20 and 24 residents. So we're actually maximized at 92 for the building. And I think it was you, I can't remember who asked the question, but who would regulate that? The State Department of Social Services actually regulates the number of residents in the facility. That the maximum number is based on the zoning. So they're in there on a regular basis, probably monthly. So they're the ones that actually do the bed count and make sure that we are actually, within the zoning that we have. So I think I answered this question. If anybody has any others, I'll be happy to answer.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Other than the fact that we're very happy in being in Williamsburg. It's been a very good building for us. We have a lot of families in the area that we're able to serve, and we're proud to be a part of Williamsburg.
Well, thank you. We're pleased to have you here, so thank you very much. Would anybody else wish to speak to this issue? If not, I'll close the public hearing and come back to City Council for discussion and action.
I'd just like to offer that since Spring Arbor has been in operation, I've not heard any concerns about the intensity of use, strain on the infrastructure, concerns from area residents. What I do believe is that there's a growing need in this community and around the country for memory unit care, and that's something that, as much as it's needed to have more flexibility in this facility to meet that need, is only positive.
Great. Thanks, Scott. If not, I think we all agree with those comments, so thank you, Paula, and I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the approval of PCR 12-019.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you. Our next order of business is reports. First are the monthly financial statements. Jack, anything in particular?
Yes, just quickly, we're now a third of the way through the fiscal year, and at this point, it looks like we're in a little better shape on spending than we really are, because we're just a payday behind where we were at the same point last year. So if you put that back in, it puts spending about on par. Revenues, again, tracking pretty much as expected. You can see that the room tax receipts are running behind last year, and so we will be challenged to make budget on that item, but we'll just, again, watch it through the rest of the year. Meal tax, however, is outperforming last year, and so that should be pretty close to budget. Obviously, it is too early to say. So Phil Serra is the expert on this, so any questions you have, we'll be happy to help.
Any questions on the financials? Not, then monthly department operating reports. Anything in particular you want to point out?
Yes, sir. Just point out under the city manager reports, we always put in there both the new businesses that have arrived in town over the next month. But as you know, Michelle keeps close track of not only new business startups, but also the total number of average businesses in the city. And as of this month, we have 815 year-to-date on average. Same time last year, it was 786. So the more, the merrier. We're always looking for the number of businesses to grow in the city.
As I told Michelle, I've cut more ribbons in the last 6 months than I did in the previous 2 years. That's it. Great, thank you. Any questions on the operating reports? Yes, sir. If not, city manager reports, we have two. The first is the VDOT revenue sharing funds for fiscal year 2014, proposed resolution 12-18.
I'd like to preface it by saying a word or two, and then I'm going to turn it over to City Engineer Steve Martin, who will go over it in more detail. As you recall, this section of improvement to Route 60 East is intended to be done with a grant through the Federal Enhancement Grant Program for Transportation. It was applied for in conjunction with James City County and York County. We were not awarded the grant in the last cycle. Since that time, the Enhancement Grant Program has been changed substantially under the new federal authorization. It's now called Transportation Alternatives, and beautification and landscaping has essentially been removed from that as an eligible use, and much of this project was just that. So we realized we had another round of VDOT revenue sharing was coming up, and so internally the staff discussed this and felt that we're not going to be able to go through door A, we ought to try door B, and so that sets the stage for what we're recommending today. So with that, Steve, I'll ask you to come up, and as Steve's coming up, I've got to tell you, this is the last time you'll see him as city engineer at the podium. Steve has been with the city for 42 years of service. Doesn't look like that's possible, but in fact it's true. We checked the math, and Steve will be retiring in December, and I can tell you we will find a successor, but we will never find anyone to replace the job he has done for the city. So Steve, if you would tell us about this project.
First off, these 42 years have been my pleasure. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Steve.
Before you is proposed resolution 12-18 that indicates council support of an application for FY14 revenue sharing funds from VDOT. These funds will be used to construct sidewalks, a multi-use trail, lighting, and landscape improvements along York Street between Page Street and Quarter Path Road. The total estimate for the project is $611,500, and the city's 50% share is $305,750. About $428,000 will be used for sidewalks, curbs, signage, and a multi-use trail. About $115,000 will be used for street lighting and about $16,000 is projected for landscaping. These improvements are one of the city's priority corridor beautification and pedestrian access projects. Okay. First, talk about the north side of York Street. Okay. From the intersection of Page and Lafayette down to the last driveway of the Clarion Motel. The sidewalk in that area is all broken up, and the gutter has been overlaid and is non-existent. And both are in need of replacement. So in that section, it's about 1,200 feet long. A new 5-foot wide brick sidewalk and concrete curb and gutter will be constructed. It's about, like I said, 1,200 feet. On the opposite side, on the south side, sorry, my fingers are hitting the wrong buttons here. Okay, along the pasture side, which is the south side. Okay. The existing gravel path is poorly defined, and it's hard to maintain. It might only be about 3 feet wide at this time. The grass keeps coming in on it. And so staff has met with CW staff, and they agree with the installation of a new 6-foot wide exposed aggregate concrete sidewalk in that area. In this area here, a 10-foot wide multi-use path will be constructed between Pocahontas Street and Quarter Path parking lot. It's about 400 feet long. It'll close a gap in the route between the multi-use trail, which is here on Quarter Path Road, and the restored area. It's a critical link in the future Quarter Path Country Road loop, and it'll also provide a shortcut through here for the people that are using the multi-use path. Street lights, presently the street lights are located along the north side of York Street. The existing light poles do not meet current city standards, and they'll be replaced. The existing lights are 14,000 lumens. They're on concrete poles, and they're located generally in the middle of the sidewalk. The new lights will be 23,000 lumen lights with cutoff fixtures on green fiberglass poles, and we'll be locating them right behind the sidewalk. And where possible, some of the inconsistent on-site lighting will be removed. Funds are also included for corridor landscaping. These improvements will include some street trees and low-level vegetation to screen some of the parking lots. The extent of the landscaping will be determined by discussions with the property owners, as most of the space available for landscaping is on private property. Street signs, a lot of them are presently located on the light poles. In this area, we're going to replace them with new signs that will be mounted on the city standard green posts. We'll hear from VDOT in July of 2013 if we're approved or not. And if we're approved, the design work and the bids will be done in the last half of 2013, and the project will be constructed in the first half of 2014. The recommendation reads that City Council approve Resolution Number 12-18 and authorize the City Manager to proceed with applying for FY14 VDOT revenue sharing funds and to execute all necessary documents relative to carrying out the program. I'll be glad to answer any questions if you might have.
Great. Thank you, Steve, and welcome. And you will be missed in the city, as you know. We really appreciate all you've done over the years to make this an ever better place for us to live. So thank you very much. I guess this is part of that overall design for the corridor between the city and Busch Gardens that, and this isn't all of it in the city, but this comes out of that design study.
That's correct. It's in accord with the Carlton Abbott plan that was proposed earlier.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a few questions. The aggregate path or sidewalk that extends down along the pasture and then along the tree line, the way it appears on this image, I'm assuming it's a matter of perspective, the way the tops of it's not actually going inside the tree line. It's going to stay outside the tree line where the current path is?
That's correct. It'll probably be centered on the existing path, which is probably 6 or 8 feet from the curb. There's right between the fence of the pasture and the curb. It's a pretty broad area, and we'll center it right in there. There won't be any clearing required.
And I'm curious, is it more expensive to do aggregate? I understand why you might want to do it in front of the pasture, but to carry the aggregate all the way down to Pocahontas Street, is that just to keep a consistency of look as
Yes.
opposed to going to blacktop partway down once you hit the tree line?
Yeah, it would be just for the consistent look. And it's related to the asphalt. It might be a little bit more expensive, but it's hard to get a paver in there and do that kind of paving work. The multi-use trail will be asphalt pavement, but that's 10 feet wide, which a paver can easily do. So the sidewalk, it would be the exposed aggregate concrete all the way to Pocahontas Street.
And once it turns right on Pocahontas, is that on existing sidewalk?
Yes, and I guess if any bikers would be there, they would just ride on the road. We'll add some signage.
Well, that was the next question, because it's not necessarily intuitive that one's going to turn right on Pocahontas to get to the multi-use path on Quarter Path.
Right, that would be a part of our signage package, and it would be well routed to direct them through that area.
And this question might be for Mr. Tuttle or Mr. Martin, if you want to take a shot at it. What does this mean for the long-term plan or aspiration for the Route 60 enhancement effort?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, this portion of the project would no longer be part of that application. But in fact, the application is going to need to be entirely redone, and to see what will qualify, how it can change so that it will qualify to the extent it can under these new guidelines. And there's a working group being led by the Historic Triangle Collaborative and convened by them, still with Carlton Abbott's office. It's engaged in that to attempt to get that done. But it hasn't all been worked out yet to figure out just whether the alternatives grant or some other form of grant funding might be workable. But it's a tougher task now. The city will still be part of that grant application, assuming it does go forward. There is a piece in it which is not in this, and that is to assist with some of the underground wiring right at the city limit line. We cannot use revenue sharing funds for that, and we're not sure we're going to be able to find other grant funds for it either, but there will be some basis for the city to be part of that regional application so that we don't take anything away from it for that purpose.
So just so expectations are in line with reality, it's possible that none of this project down the road could fit into this type of grant program.
It would have to go other ways to be funded, yes.
Which may be through the localities or through some other granting mechanism. What were the decision was made to incorporate these aspects of the original plan to the use of the VDOT revenue sharing funds.
Right.
What were the competing projects or opportunities that this prevailed over?
Well, if we could have attempted to do a second major sidewalk program, as we're doing in FY13, and disperse it in a few of the other sidewalk projects that are out there, but this one was just more compact as a single project that fit revenue sharing. So there wasn't, as we didn't have another project all lined up ready to go. We substituted this. We would have had to try to cobble together a few others, probably at a good deal less money than this, and put a few more sidewalks in. And we need to be thinking about that now for FY15.
Sure, and not that that's not an important thing to want to do, but the fact that this is a contiguous project, it gets us to a greater end result, which may take a long time to accomplish, which is completing that loop all the way around. But it seems to me like it's something that's important to do.
If I could inject as well, what this does is if you think about that entire project from essentially the intersection to Busch Gardens has already done some parts of that. The area in front of Doctors Hospital has made changes, and this, so again, there are going to be pieces of it that begin to show what the rest of it can look like.
Well,
And that's important.
Yeah, but the loop I was talking about
Yeah,
is
right,
the
is
one
the
that goes
one, yeah.
on out through the Riverside
Side
property
property,
and
right.
then eventually,
Yeah.
or maybe out Quarter Path Road.
Yeah.
Once the infrastructure's ever built in Riverside, and it'd be nice to eventually connect Country Road to
Country
that.
Road.
I think it's a good point. This is both part of the Country Road Loop and part of the 3-jurisdiction Busch Gardens to Colonial Williamsburg.
Yeah. Thank you, that's all.
Yeah. Scott?
Steve, just to be clear, on the north side, that sidewalk, what's the status of the sidewalk between where the red line ends and, say, on down past those, that have just, that
Apartments.
timeshare that was just converted to,
In this section and through here,
yes, sir.
that sidewalk is concrete, and it's existing, and it's in pretty good shape right
Okay.
now. Part of it is brand new, and it was when they converted that motel over to apartments that
Gotcha.
that was put in. So this was a good stopping point.
And then that sidewalk ends up at, just basically across from the Knights Inn?
At the Bolero? At the gas
Yes.
station?
Okay. Put in that plug for the hotel.
Thank you, Steve, for 42 years. That's amazing. I hope you and Cindy have a lot of plans for the future.
We do.
Good. Hey, consideration to the curb on the south side. I mean, it's in pretty bad shape as well. I know that there's a bike lane there, and and I've ridden that, and it gets a little, harrowing there at points, and the asphalt drops off into the gutter, and there's some curb cuts that aren't used. Any consideration to kind of budgeting that into this? And
Well, as we get in there and do the detailed work, we can identify, real substandard areas of that. It's not planned to do all of that at this point. But if there are pieces that, that really need to be done, we could do that, or we could even do some of that, through maintenance.
yeah, just something I think we ought to look at if we're going to spruce up this area. That curb cut on that side. Some of them, I don't know if they're used at all anymore.
Some of them have been abandoned.
Yeah, and it might be an opportunity to fix those while we're in there.
We can look at that.
Thank you.
Judy?
I don't really have any questions, but I just want to say, over and over, we hear how important the entry corridors are to the city, that people talk about the entry corridors, they worry about how they look, and this is one of our major ones, especially as Quarter Path develops. So I think it's really important that we do this. So, thank you.
Any further questions?
Just maybe a follow-up. As we approach this as we try this new approach to getting this grant money, are the counties doing something similar? Has there been any coordination with them to take advantage of?
Right. They're aware of what we're doing. They have other priorities for revenue sharing that's not this. So.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? If not, I'll take.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council approve Resolution 12-18 and authorize the city manager to proceed with applying for fiscal year 14 VDOT revenue sharing funds and to execute all necessary documents relative to carrying out the program.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please? Ms. Scott?
Ms. Newton?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Our next order of business under city manager reports is adoption of goals, initiatives, and outcomes for the 2013-14 biennium.
As a result of your discussion on Monday, we have made some amendments to the draft, principally putting in the preamble, which is very close to the one that was used 2 years ago, but noting the emphasis on healthy community in this one, and other than that, essentially the same that we've used before. The two most significant changes have been the addition of 2 new initiative statements, one under character of the city dealing with the creation of a citizens committee on community wellness, and the other under economic vitality on a foreign student and short-term worker orientation program. So those have been added. The editorial changes that we talked about on Monday and a number of the other initiatives have been made. We are still waiting on that final graph dealing with outcomes of secondary education with the school division. We hope to have that tomorrow. I'm afraid we do not have it for you today, so we're asking that you'd adopt it and allow that to go in after adoption today. So those are the major points, and we recommend that you adopt the biennial goals, initiatives, and outcomes.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
I think we've said a lot.
Beat this one.
That won't stop us from saying that.
That's right. Scott, anything you want to add
it's
at this point?
Very well discussed, and it's been a really good, inclusive process.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and I think it really is a testament to open government, having, had all these discussions, taken input from the public, and, staff making the changes as we've made recommendations. And I think we have a good document here that gives us a good framework to do good work in the next 2 years. So.
I just want to, thank the staff. This was a huge amount of work, and we kept changing it, and they were fine with it. So I just thank you.
And I'll echo that thanks to staff, and I'd like to also thank my fellow council members. I think this has been a really good cooperative, inclusive process, as Doug said. So thank you all very much.
Can I say one more thing to add on to what Ms. Knudsen's comment? This document is not an end. I mean, it's a means. It's a roadmap for city staff and council for the next 2 years. So it was a lot of work to create it, but I think it's fair to say the work is just beginning, because now we have only 2 years to make these things happen. And there are a remarkable number of efforts and initiatives contained in this document, and they will guide city government for a long time. So that's the importance of this document, and it also gets tied to our budget process. So it helps guide and inform Phil and his team as they put those numbers together. And so thanks to staff for not only putting this together and for all that you're going to do, but also creating that integration of efforts so that these things don't stand alone. They do tie together to make the Williamsburg experience what we all enjoy.
Thank you. Well said. With that, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the adoption of the goals, initiatives, and outcomes for the 2013-2014 biennium.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knudsen?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
And Jack, I hope you'll convey to staff
Certainly
our
will.
sincere thanks.
We'll meet
for all
tomorrow,
of
and
that.
that'll be the first thing I say.
Thank you.
Would you like to put in a little commercial for next week at this point?
Yes. Next Thursday at 5 o'clock at the community building, we will have a State of the City address, and that will be focused primarily on the goals, initiatives, and outcomes statement that we adopted. So, yes, so we welcome anybody from the city or anyone with an interest in the city to please be there. And again, that's at 5 o'clock on Thursday, the 15th at the community building. Thank you. Our next order of business under reports is city attorney reports, and we have two. Ms. Sheldon, you're keeping us busy these days.
We have two housekeeping matters today for council. The first is proposed ordinance 12-27. The state code has been amended to require that for appeals to the Board of Equalization that at least 45 days of notice be given prior to a hearing on the appeal. And so staff, in examining the ordinance, it's clear there's no 45-day period in the ordinance now, and so staff is recommending that the city code be amended to require that the Board of Equalization conclude with all of their appeals by November 30th instead of September 30th to provide for that additional time.
Any questions? Again, this is brings us into line with state code. If not, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council adopt proposed ordinance 12-27.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knudsen?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Our next order of business is spot blight.
Spot's not going to be very happy about this.
This is proposed ordinance 12-28. The city code currently provides that when a building or other structure endangers the public health, safety, or welfare, the building official can require that it be removed or repaired by the owner, and if the owner fails to do that, then the city can take care of that for them, and it becomes a lien on the property in that event. The existing code section does not provide for specific notice. It provides for reasonable notice. This update brings this section into line with the state code and provides for the specific notice that's required now by the state code. It also clarifies that before the city can make those repairs or that demolition, the city manager has to approve it, because in some instances that might be a somewhat large expense depending on the size of the project. It also provides that City Council can waive the liens on the property if it's in the best interest of getting the property sold. It would continue to be a liability of the former property owner, but it would no longer be a lien on the property, but City Council would have to do that. So it provides council some flexibility in helping the property owner dispose of the property if that's appropriate. So we've made those changes, and the staff recommends that council adopt the ordinance as written.
Thank you, Christine. Any questions?
I have two questions. Ms. Shelton, how often roughly does this come into play?
We had one situation earlier this year where we started the notice process for this, and the property owner then brought the property into compliance. So we've never had to go in and make the repairs. This just gives the city the option to do that if the owner refuses.
And I think I understand the rationale for having the flexibility to waive the lien on the property in order to get it sold, hopefully so that it gets into the hands of an owner who's willing to invest in the property and upgrade the condition to at least meet the code. But then if the prior property owner gains the funds from the sale of the property, the city, I mean, it seems like we miss an opportunity there when there's a transfer.
Potentially, unless the property owner sells the property for less than he owes on it from his mortgage, in which case then it would be property underwater, much like mortgages are now, and it would be essentially a short sale where council is a lien holder.
And if the lien's removed from the property and assigned directly to the individual, there's not recourse at the time of sale if there is still value left from the completion of the transaction or profit, or is that just a situation where the choice?
We would need to deal with that at the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. You mentioned that the city manager makes the decision. That's not to imply that the city manager can go in and do the evaluation of what's...
No. The building inspector has to determine that it's a threat to the health, safety, and welfare of the public. But once he makes that decision, because he's the one empowered by state law to do that, then if there is an expenditure of city funds, the city manager would have to approve that expenditure.
Okay, good. And then also, what's the process today? Because I know we've gone to court on occasions to try to get a property owner to do certain things. Is the court process been eliminated through this?
No, this is just another avenue, and this is for serious violations of the building code. This is walls are collapsing or roofs are collapsing. This is not for the everyday peeling paint, broken window, column is in need of repair, steps are broken. This is for very serious situations where the building presents a hazard to the public.
Okay.
So a failing retaining wall might qualify under that?
That's right.
Yes, I do have a question then. What about that house on Jamestown Road? Is that approaching that? I don't know.
I can't answer that. The building inspector would have to answer that question.
Okay. Because the neighbors would contend that that's a health hazard. So I don't know if it is.
But that determination is made by the building inspector,
It is.
right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Any further questions?
And then I guess, just to follow up on there's a process that, I mean, we have to distinguish between what is not serious and what is serious, and
Right.
and I guess that's written somewhere.
There is a Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code, and the building inspector uses that to determine the degree of severity. This is just one option for dealing with the extremely serious cases that can't wait till we go through the court process.
And I guess my thinking is that I know we can't act arbitrarily on things because there's a lot of written law that says what it says so that it doesn't happen.
And there is still an appeal to the local Board of Building Code Appeals and the statewide Board of Building Code Appeals. So there's still an appeal process that's available even in this situation. This, however, is one way of expediting the process in very serious situations.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Nicely done. And any further questions? If not, I'll take a motion.
I just want to add, I don't think the state would ever give us the authority to do anything that they might consider anything but absolutely necessary. I move that City Council adopt proposed ordinance 12-28.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
The next order of business is unfinished business. I believe we have none. Is that correct? Under new business, appointments to boards and commissions, I believe we have one. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I move that City Council, effective January 1st, 2013, reappoint Andrew Edwards and Joe Hertzler to the Architectural Review Board for 4-year terms to expire December 31, 2016.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Brings us to our final agenda item for the day, which is open forum, a time which anyone who wishes to address City Council on any matter may do so. I do have received a written comment from John Whitley, who asked that it be entered in our minutes. So, Ms. Scott, if you would do that. If anyone else wishes to speak to council, please come forward, state your name and address. Hello, Gladys. How are you?
Gladys Victor, 704 Powell. I have been addressed with several comments about the, Dillon law and the inspections, and we need more inspection or water inspection. I think we need to pursue looking into that. I understand you can rotate these areas. I know you can't do the whole town, but I'm under the impression that one could do a certain section in 4 years and then another section in 4 years. But I'm just suggesting this being looked into if you're interested in expanding the inspection, rental inspection area.
Right. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
you're welcome.
Ms. Shelton, if you would look into that, appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else wish to address City Council on any matter? If not, that brings us to the end of our agenda. We have no issues for closed session. Is that correct? So, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.